Evening, Littleton. Welcome to the March 27, 2024 Board of Health meeting. It is now 7 o'clock, and we are going to get started. Our first item tonight is a discussion, basically is information for the board and the public regarding a tobacco tobacco product violation for Littleton Convenience at 12 Jennifer Street. So for the board, you should have seen in your packet that the Boards of Health Tobacco Control Alliance, based out of Leominster, is our collaborative tobacco enforcement and education agency. They did a check-in education and survey back in early March, and during their inspection and educational opportunity, they found two areas of failure to comply: offering for sale a flavored tobacco product or tobacco product flavor enhancer, as well as failure to maintain a record of the documentation submitted by the manufacturer or a manufacturer's agent certifying that such tobacco product does not meet the definition of a flavored tobacco product or tobacco product flavor enhancer, and that the product lacks any characterizing flavor. This was their second violation within the last 36 months, so it counts as a second violation under the enforcement rules. Their previous violation had been an underage sale on October 18, 2023, so about 6 months ago. As part of that second offense within 36 months, the standardized penalty under Mass Regulations 105 CMR 665,000 is a $2,000 fine and a 10-day tobacco sales permit. Excuse me. I heard a ding for someone in the audience. But nope, that was Kevin Baker. Welcome, Kevin. So this is a CMR penalty of 10 business day suspension of their permission to sell tobacco products, as well as $2,000 fine. They were notified by certified mail from the Tobacco Control Alliance that was sent out on the 12th. They do have the opportunity to request a hearing before the Board of Health for a modification of that order. They have 7 days from the time of receipt to make that request. We don't have a green card back of when they actually received it, but it looks like it was sent out on the 12th. So even assuming some extra time in there, their 7-day window should have come and gone. And to the best of my knowledge, I'll refer briefly to Brenda and Francis. I've not seen anything from either of you. I'm assuming that we did not receive any communication from Littleton Convenience requesting a hearing for this.
No, I have not received any from them. Nope.
All right, thank you. So really, this is more informational, and if we have any questions, we can work from there. So they do have 30, I believe. Oh, sorry, they have 21 days since the receipt of this to pay the amount to Town of Littleton Board of Health. Have we seen a check from them for this? I mean, we're not quite to that 21-day window yet, but we're about a week out from the end of that 21-day window. So if you guys could just, if that comes in, just drop a note to the board so we know that it's been received.
No check
as part of this. No check as of yet. All right. The Tobacco Control Alliance issued dates of a recommended, or has notified them that their suspension of sales will be from Friday, April 19, 2024 through Sunday, April 28th, 2024. And they can resume sales again on Monday, April 29th. And as part of that order, basically all tobacco and vape products must be removed from public areas, basically not out of the store, but out of any public retail area. So packaged up and moved back room or someplace else. Mr. Wason.
Just saying, certified mail shows it was delivered on March 16th. So the 21 days starts from there. So their suspension period is after the 21 days, just to make sure. But we should make sure that we get that check by the 7th of April. Is that the right math? 6th of April? Something like that.
I can do a check-in tomorrow with them.
Looks like that's a weekend, so I'm not sure if the 5th of April counts, but it should be there by the Monday the 8th.
No, I mean, I don't think we need to check in with them. I mean, they are not out of compliance as far as the order at this point. That's just my take on it. It's your call if you'd like to be more proactive or not. But I think, you know, they have not exceeded the expectations of the order at this point. So, with this informational, that certainly if they come before us, then we could have a long conversation about what options are available to them as an appeals of how that changes. But again, we haven't heard anything to request a change of order or any appeals process. So it is what it is, and we'll see. The Tobacco Health Alliance did not say whether they would be going back and double checking during that time window to ensure that they are in compliance during their suspension period. Perhaps that's something, Francis, you and Jim can make sure to touch base with them to see if that's something that they will do, to go back and do a double check that on, you know, Friday the 19th, that they've suspended their sales and packaged up their materials.
I have a meeting with her tomorrow, so I'll check in on it.
Okay, awesome. No, as I say, we're still a ways out, but just to make sure that they are in fact in compliance. And again, hopefully they will be, because that would make a third violation within 36 months, which I don't really think they want to face. So, all right. Any questions, comments from the board regarding Littleton Convenience 12 Jennifer Street and their tobacco compliance piece? All right. Moving on, our second discussion item of the evening is our model Board of Health regulations for private wells. I'm going to defer to Mr. Baker, if that's okay, as our point person on this.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I had met with Mr. Daigle on it, and we're starting to, Francis, I don't know, did you have a chance to get into the OneDrive and take a look at the notes that were in there on that yet? Oh, you're muted.
Sorry.
There you go.
I've only just kind of glanced over it, but next week I'll put some time into it, and I'll probably have questions when we meet, and then we can bring it to the board. It might make more sense at this point to do a portion of it instead of just the whole thing, just to kind of update certain items. Because in particular, like geothermal, I had a lot of questions around that.
Yeah, we're hoping, I think, take the whole geothermal section right out of those regs, so it doesn't get confused. I think that was
It was my recommendation that we particularly exclude geothermal from any of these well things, to have a sentence in there that says that, because we don't want it to be even included in that.
Okay.
There were other.
I think we did.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Mr. Davis.
Yeah, no, there was there have been problems reported in other towns that have well regulations like this that don't have exclusions for geothermal, and because they don't have geothermal exclusions, people have read that they need to have all these well things applied to them, and there's no reason for it. The town that gives an example of that right now that comes to mind is Stowe.
And I think the other thing in the model well regs that we were trying to adjust was to actually have a section in there for pre-existing wells, because it really just calls out the testing requirements for new well construction. So putting together some compliance for existing wells, and what we should be, what an owner should be testing for if they're not already testing for something, and then if they already have treatment in place, how does that testing all happen, and how does it get accounted for? Was the trick. So thank you, Mr. Daigle, for looking into that.
Yeah, so I'll bring something to the next board meeting for the board to review ahead of time.
And just around the geothermal well, if I can, I think we pulled that piece out. I think we did want to leave in a single line piece of a geothermal well that is not connected to potable water system in the house, because there are some designs who are kind of dual function. So if it was a strictly geothermal,
Closed loop.
then it does not fall under these regulations. If there's any connection between potable water system in the house and that geothermal well, it's rare, but it had come up that there are times when some ways they are interconnected. We just want to make sure that if they are interconnected, then they need to be treated as a potable well. So it's not simply wiping it out, going, I have a geothermal, now I'm off the books. As long as it's just geothermal, we're good at this point as a draft. All right. Mr. Baker, Mr. Daigle, thank you so much for your work on well regulation. Again, this is just quick discussion. I don't see any hands in the audience for that one, so I'm going to continue moving on to our 710 discussion around the infectious disease decision support tool. And already way ahead of me, we're going to defer to Dr. Wason and his grass.
Okay, here's the update. Omicron JN.1 is the vast majority of all our cases, over 90% in the New England area. So it's the same one that's been around for a few weeks now. Our vaccination rate is kind of the tail end of the season. CDC recently came out and said that our senior citizens and potentially those who are at higher risk should potentially get a second vaccination this season. But right now our vaccination rate is at 31.7%. It's pretty much kind of stagnated at 30%. I think people are looking at the weather and it's springtime, and I think vaccinations go right out of your mindset. But until we kind of, I think, live with COVID for a little longer, the flu, right? Influenza is extremely seasonal, right? You don't talk a lot about the flu during the summertime. I don't know what COVID's going to kind of look like. It hasn't been nearly as flat seasonally as influenza. And so I would look at it as something like it still would make sense to get your vaccination now if you haven't already, because kids are still in school, people are still doing things together. It's only springtime. And I think years will tell us whether there's kind of a seasonality to it or not. There are definitely more peaks in the winter, but I'm not sure if it's quite as dramatic as influenza. So it's not over. Vaccinations are still available. As I said at a previous meeting of ours, now that Francis is here, I would echo it again that I think what this does tell us is we need to do a better job next season of trying to get our community vaccinated. I think 30% is not a good number to be hitting for our community. And I've talked to some people who kind of, it's just out of sight, out of mind. They can't remember if they got it this year, but they think they didn't. And so they're not sure. That's not the attention that I think it should warrant. So I will keep reporting it, but I don't expect that number to change a lot for this season now. Wastewater number is still in kind of the middle hundreds. Influenza at the Massachusetts level is still moderate, and similarly, vaccination rate, we got 51.7% of individuals vaccinated for influenza, which is kind of below our target. And lastly, RSV, still medium, but as you can see from the chart, really tailing down, so we're coming out of the RSV season. That's what I got. Questions, comments?
Nothing from the board. See nothing. Dr. Wason, thank you as always. All right, our next item is starting the process for Board of Health and department goals and priorities. I don't expect us to solve this one tonight. We have a big, what do we do tomorrow, right through what do we do 10 years from now kind of vision we need to really develop. This really is just an opportunity to kind of start that process of what are the fires we need to look at in the next days, weeks, months, and how do we start setting the department and the board up for where we need to be a year from now, 2 years from now, 5 years from now. So I'm going to start with opening up to the board. What are folks' thoughts? What are your, again, and I'm going to also say there's only so many fires we can fight at once because all of us have our pet things and our mindsets of we could easily set a list of 47 fires that we need to address within the next 48 hours. That's obviously not practical. So, but just I'm going to open up to the board. What are your immediate pieces? What are your, within 6 months kind of pieces, and what's important, but when we are ready for it? Mr. Wason.
First of all, this is my first meeting with Francis. So welcome, Francis. Thank you for being here. Look how excited we are to plan out the next many years of your life. So what I would throw out, and I've said this to a couple of people, is number one, we've always said that a community health assessment was an early priority for our new health director. I still feel that's the case. I'm a little worried about if we go too far down a goal setting road, say today or in the next 3 months, we might be kind of really in the clouds or in the shadows, not really sure of everything that's out there. And so I think there's a balance of how can we as a board get together and feel firm in our understanding of the needs and our ideas, because we all have thoughts and ideas and we can get those out there. But then there's going to be some information that comes via Francis that says, oh, we didn't know we didn't know. So the other idea I had that I've thrown out before is also about, I would love it if we could do some sort of retreat as a board so that we can have focused time and energy that we can really look at what information we have. And maybe the best thing to do that is after the community health assessment. I'm not sure, what our timeline is on that yet, if that's something we could achieve, but maybe a fall time for a retreat where we can really focus and get together and say, well, these are the top then whatever number of things that we would like to work on, and let's work together on prioritizing. So lots of ideas, I'm sure. And I would also want to make sure we're capturing that in a way that we're not just then spinning our wheels every couple of meetings saying, oh, I forgot about this one again. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Mr. Baker.
I agree. I think the community health assessment is a great early goal for us to focus on. I think it will give us more goals to focus on after we complete the assessment. I also think in tandem with that is getting our systems in place and up and running so we can work smarter, not harder, and allow the residents to for instance apply for a permit online and run that whole process through a system that's already there that needs some tweaking and fine tuning, but to get that in place I think is an important early step that we should take to make sure things run smoothly over the next year.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Baker. Mr. Davis.
Hello, Francis. This is our first time having a meeting together, so welcome, and look forward to working with you in the future. I'm going to just say that I'm going to pile on to what Dr. Wason and Mr. Baker have already said. And then I'm also going to say we need to kind of also look at a few things that may have gone by the wayside over the last few years through COVID and everything else that we were working on. As an example, we need to make sure that we're looking at animal boardings and things like that, like where are we boarding our horses and all those things. There are some of our neighbors in Littleton have also backyard chickens and things like that, but that all requires a permit. So we want to, definitely take a look. And the main reason for that, in my opinion, is to make sure that the manure problem is solved if it's near a well or something like that. We don't want manure leaking into our water system here in town. So thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, sir. All right. I guess it's me. So definitely agree. Community health survey. I'm a nurse. Part of nursing school is doing community health surveys. We've just been a whole semester doing it. So that was a long time ago, but I'm happy to do my piece. But that we don't necessarily, we have senses, we talk to folks, but often we hear what folks' priorities are. We don't necessarily hear the folks who aren't speaking up or just aren't recognized, or challenges that aren't necessarily recognized. So that comprehensive of assessment is probably long overdue. I've been here on the board for about 3 years. I'm not sure when the last one, if we've ever done a comprehensive community health assessment. I simply don't know. But obviously doing that is going to take time. So short term, so basically for me, obviously that is the bigger picture piece. I really kind of see of us as you and Jim are identifying challenges. Jim certainly has shared some of the challenges he's had with, simply availability of staff and timing and sharing, and how do you cover everything he's trying to cover over the years. That same piece from you, Francis. What do you need from us? What barriers are coming up that we maybe to help work through as a group, because we're all smarter than any one of us together. All of us together are smarter than any one of us, to identify those challenges and how we can work through them so we can be successful as a board and a department. Definitely back speaking to how do we build up our systems, that we are kind of starting systems a little bit from scratch as we bring things a little bit more in-house. How do we build them so that they are functional from the beginning to the best of our ability, easy for not only our residents and neighbors to be able to utilize, but also for us? How easy is it for you, for Brenda, or the board makes a request for information to be able to pull up, hey, can we see the last 5 inspections for someplace because there's been an issue? Is this been ongoing? Is it something new? Those kind of pieces that can sometimes be challenges, that how can we make it successful both from the consumer side, but also from the operation side? That will just take some time and your experience. And, this is a chance for us to kind of build with the infrastructure we have, but build it in a way that's going to be really productive and functional. For me as a board member, just having some sense of what's happening, that, Jim's team is really, really busy, but, we often don't see all the work that's being done. Again, I'm going to bounce back to, I'm a nurse. The doctor comes in and spends 5 minutes writing orders. Sorry, Dr. Wason. And then the nurse spends the next 8 hours making those 5 minutes of writing happen. We know that Jim's doing inspections for Title V and for wells and for test pits and for restaurant inspections and for complaints and for housing and all these things. The board doesn't need to know necessarily every single one of those, but we only hear about them when it comes to the board level because someone has filed an appeal to an order or an issue. Simply hearing that, hey, you know what? The department has done 15 restaurant inspections this week. Here's the places we inspected and everything's good. Or we had to go back and do 48-hour re-inspections for issues and they've been resolved. That level of just going, we don't need to know the minutia of every piece of work that's being done, but having the board simply being aware that the work's being done. All right, we've got 75 restaurants in town. That number's off the top of my head because I'll be honest, I can't tell you how many restaurants we have in town, which as a board member, for me, I don't feel comfortable with that, but I've never been able to get a number of how many food service licenses we have in town. They're all supposed to be inspected every 6 months. I'd like to be able to say as a board member, as a chair, saying yes, all 75 or whatever number that is of our food service licensees have been inspected within the last 6 months. And I'd like to be able to say that with confidence, that anytime someone walks up to me and asks me, that I can say that. So just that kind of piece for me, short term, of how are things going? What's happening? What's been done? We've done 5 Title V's. We've completed our 6 months, restaurant inspections. Some of that kind of just informational stuff. So as the board, we can feel comfortable and confident that the regulatory requirements of the board are being accomplished by our professionals. I don't know if any of the other board members have a perspective on that, but I mean, for me, I think in the short term, that would just be what's going on. How are we doing? What are what's going on? What work is being done, and what barriers are out there that we can help try to address to make sure it's getting done the way it needs to be. And that's going to only can really come from you guys, because we're not out there every day doing it. So. Mr. Baker.
Yeah, thanks for that, Dan. I agree. Food inspectional piece is a big piece. And I think you hit the nail on the head. And I just wanted to, I had been meaning to mention different things like the the food truck regulations that we started working on, the trash hauler regulations that we got to the 1 yard line. And there are probably a couple other things that have just slipped through the cracks due to COVID and people being busy. But just to get a handle on all those things and just to start to cross things off the list and get things in place and get things to where they should be with a town like Littleton. And a great idea about the a retreat. I think a late summer or early fall retreat will give us some time to get acclimated here and to set some goals moving forward for 2025. Thank you.
All right. If it's acceptable to the board, I will try to pull together in the next few days a doodle poll or equivalent for early mid-September days, weekend, evening. Any preferences on, or we'll just see I'll put everything in there and we'll just see what works for folks and work from there as a start. And obviously if something changes before then, we'll deal with it because that's what we do. I was just making some notes. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Thank you. If I'm just going to say that maybe October might be a better month based on community health assessment work for a retreat. It will take realistically probably that long before we get to a phase where we talk about what will go out. With the schools being out, it's going to be hard to get internally employees to meet in some kind of committee fashion. So realistically, September is probably where we're going to get the most traction.
So is that around the community health assessment or is that around board and department retreat?
So I consider them kind of tied in because I think that'll be probably our biggest goal of this year. So it might be beneficial to hold off a little longer on the retreat, a month or so, just to be able to tie that into it.
Okay. So you see the groundwork for community health assessment being mostly done by September then, so that in October retreat, we can actually kind of have that information as we start making priorities?
I think we'll have something in hand by then that we can use to build on at least. Yeah.
Okay. No, thank you, sir. All right. Any other discussion around first steps for priority building? Seeing none. We're going to go to our 7:20 discussion around material submission for Board of Health meetings. So some background for folks who may not be aware that this came up. We had a few meetings in a row, and we've had a history of occasional meetings where we've had board members not receive submissions for hearings until that day or the day before, relatively short periods of time prior to meetings to be able to review that prior to having our hearings. So certainly I will be the first to speak up that, certainly I don't always have the 12 hours directly before a meeting to be able to spend time reviewing plans or statements. So having a little bit more time prior to meetings is helpful for us to be able to be a well-informed, well-reviewed board prior to having that hearing, allowing us to do research if needed, ask relevant questions, simply read through some of the documents we have, which are occasionally very, very long. We hate voting on things that we haven't had a chance to really meaningfully review. So again, I don't think we've had any structural impacts as a result of this, but we're really just trying to anticipate. So I did some reach out to Town Hall, to some of the other board chairs, particularly regulatory boards where it's a little bit different than some other boards, of how do they look at receiving materials prior to public hearings. And while they're all slightly different, they're all basically consistent that for the most part, it's at least a week out. I'm going to share my screen real quick, and I'm just going to show you I'm going to try to share my screen. The planning board's town website. If it'll let me. All right, so we should be seeing the Town of Littleton website. This is the planning board's page on our town website. And at the bottom of it, has upcoming meetings with dates, the type of meeting it is, where it is, when materials are due for any new requested hearing, and when materials are due if it's a continued hearing. So for their April 4th meeting, for example, for any new materials coming before them for a new request, it's March 13th, which is over 2 weeks prior to, and March 25th, so basically a week prior to, for a continuation hearing for updates and materials. So a significant amount of lead time so that both the department and the board has plenty of time to see this material prior to having to act upon it in a public hearing. So I also heard back from Conservation. They run between a week and 10 days as their request for materials prior to. So at our last meeting discussing this, it certainly is the mindset in other boards as well, going, they will accept things past this date, but basically preface it going that late submissions may result in having hearings continued because board and department did not have an adequate amount of time to review it. So really, this is not just an opportunity for us to decide or continue the discussion around how do we want to handle this? Do we want to change our current practice, which is we don't really have a board submission timeline. We certainly have had, when any time for Title V, for example, is submitted, the board has, I believe it's 45 days to respond to that. It rarely takes that long. And I know Jim has said trying to facilitate residents and, our neighbors to be able to get on the agenda as soon as someone submits, even before any revisions or feedback has been given, that, that surface, everything seems to be here, even though it's not been reviewed. Let's try to get you onto the agenda as soon as possible so that it's not a 45-day window. Okay, now it seems acceptable. Now you need a waiver. Now you're 2 weeks out for the next. So trying to play that balance of how do we best serve our neighbors, our residents, our customers, while also making sure that we have what we need so we can be successful and not have to continue hearings if we don't have to. So opening it up to the board thoughts, that's kind of the background of what the discussion is and where we've gotten from and what we've heard back from other boards here in town of what we would like to do. Do we want to set some kind of time limit, whether it's hard or soft or anything else? I saw Mr. Baker's first.
I was going to say that I really like the way the planning board does it and how it's very transparent, and the meeting dates are all there. The due dates are there. And I really like the way you put it, Dan, that, we might be able to, you'll review the materials in time if you get it in after this date, but it might result in a continued hearing as well. So I think we answered, you might have answered the question for us, but I'm interested to see what everybody else thinks.
All right, thank you, Mr. Baker. Mr. Davis.
The last time we discussed this, I brought up the planning board stuff and I thought it was a model that we should go off and use. So +1 to Mr. Baker.
Dr. Mason.
Last time we discussed, I thought we kind of felt that the Monday, a week and a half prior, would be a good day to send out our packet to the board. Therefore, the end of the prior week would be the kind of deadline. So slightly less than 2 weeks before our meeting. The planning board meets monthly, not twice a month. And so I feel like asking for materials 3 weeks before one of our meetings. I mean, unless this board feels we need the time to do that, I'm almost wondering if that just becomes an unnecessary barrier. So I don't know how the planning board works, but can we be a little more timely in our review so that we're not making things so far out, because that will invariably mean somebody gets bumped a meeting just because they didn't get the materials to us for a new item that soon. I agree that I agree that it shouldn't be concrete. It should be more of a, if you don't get this in time, then there's a likelihood that you will get continued in your hearing. But at least it's only 2 weeks, not another month.
All right, from the professional side staff, that, certainly what you guys can't put the packets together for us to see until you have the materials, and that obviously we're not expecting you to drop the whole world on that, whatever that date is to make it happen. What kind of timeline do you need from material submission to packet creation and email? I don't know what that turnaround time is. I mean, for tonight's relatively quick, but some of our more complex meetings, that may take more time. What is a reasonable timeline turnaround for the day-to-day operations to have it in hand and then be able to put it together to put out to us?
I'll look to Brenda more for historical reference, but I think a Friday before would be fine. But it's really up to the board, and obviously it's on your off time and you don't have too much of that. So I really ask what the board feels like they need for, let's say, in a medium complex review of something ahead of time. How much time do you think you would need? We can set different levels and then in the office make assessments based on what we receive to make sure that rule is hard and fast and nothing is over cumbersome.
Mr. Davis.
So some recent examples, like when we had the commercial property over by Taylor Street, that was very complex. I know we asked a couple of times to have a professional PE person review it. And it was kind of like, well, so those types of things, I think the board has asked a couple of times to make sure that we get a PE to review it as a neutral party. So that's there. The other thing, we also had the cannabis shop also over on Taylor Street with odor issues, and I thought it would have been helpful to have an outside party look at some of the odor mitigation things that were going on, and it was kind of interesting. I don't know where that actually went after we asked about that. So I think some of those things also need to come into consideration for when we're doing this. As far as going back to the complexity of it and looking at it, the thing that I like is the format of the planning board, where it has the table and everything there. I'm not specifying that we, have a 3-week, whatever cadence. It's just the format of that. It's the information is very upfront. Here's how you do this. Here's how you go do this. Here's how you go do this. And I think having more information out there would, be better for the board as we're interacting with the public.
Dr. Mason.
So I would like to propose that the board determine the date by which we want the packet, and then Francis and Brenda work on whatever the process it requires to do that. I don't think we need to set the deadline for when it needs to be to them, because they're assembling it and they need to figure out the time it takes to do that. We need to specify this is when we want it by. And previously it was the Monday, right? A week and a half before the meeting. We should be careful because they have to make sure they have time for agenda setting, as well as anything continued from our prior meeting really only gives them 48 hours to get new documents to meet that deadline. So I like the planning board, how they do have the distinction new versus continuance. But again, I'll go back to, we should specify as a board when we think we need the packet so that we have ample time to review. With an asterisk being, if Francis or Brenda see something particularly complex, I think that warrants an offline touch base or something with something special to say, this looks like it's going to be more time. Should we plan more time on the agenda? Should we get more information out to you? Whatever that might be. I trust that they could look at something and go, this is going to blow the board away because it's so many pages and so complex.
Ms. Baker.
I keep going back to the thought that I had, maybe some more of us had the thought too on our last time we discussed this, was that if we could get the packet the Friday before our meeting, that would be great, so that we could have the weekend to review it in case there is something complex. Correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't we decide that the Friday before the meeting would be a good day to get the packet in our hands?
That's what I had been hoping for, but I
Yep.
thought this board said they wanted more time and bumped it to the Monday. So
No,
there
I think
a
that was
full
the
week and a half.
that was the confusion, I think, with what you said, where like, our deadline of when the board members need to get the packet is one thing. However long it takes them to assemble it and get it to us on that Friday, that's really up to them and how their work schedule is and how they want to handle their process.
I think Friday before is ample and reasonable.
Yeah. So whatever that means for Francis and Brenda and Jim to what they need for lead time before that to get it in. If they want to say, for continuing business, 12 business days prior to our meeting, which is the Monday before the Friday that we would want the packet. I'm sorry, 7 days before. And then, if it were 12 days before for new business, would be the Monday prior, but that's up to them.
So we'll make an internal assessment when stuff comes in, but Friday
Friday
it's
before the
done.
meeting will be
Okay.
when we would like our packet. Yeah.
Sure.
Great. Any other discussion at the moment? All right. Thanks, everybody. All right. We're up to our next.
Thank you.
Bye, Gino.
Good evening, sir.
About time. You guys drive me crazy with this stupid thing there. Why don't you put the ID numbers and the passcode? I've been fooling around here. I was going to complain to the selectmen because you guys drive me crazy. I love you guys, but every time you send me, we're going to meet this time. Hey, I even wrote it down. What the hell? So don't they see my name and email for crying out loud? What are you? Everybody's blind. They could have got me in half an hour ago. Oh, actually, 3/4 of an hour ago. It's 7:45.
Mr. Fratelloni, we understand your frustration, but we can certainly maybe work on this offline, and we can work with IT and
Yes,
options to try to address this offline.
Thank you.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you, sir. We're glad you are here with us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Right.
I miss you guys.
We are here at our 7:25 discussion regarding the odor complaint process. We do have a few folks in the audience for this one. So a little bit of background. I had Ms. Houston from the Planning Board Vice Chair reach out with some questions about the odor complaint process, particularly around sanctuary. That it sounds like there's been some confusion as to where complaints should go to, how they're processed, how they're tracked. And that sounds like they had talked to some folks in town hall, and there's some confusion as to authority process around the nuisance complaints for odors, particularly at sanctuary. So I shared my first round discussion with them that basically odors fall under Board of Health, under 11131 Charlie, so which it does. There are some other discussions that were shared today. We'll bring Mr. Rombacher and Ms. Houston forward as well, so we kind of have a group discussion as one. She asked for 2 minutes of public discussion. I asked to actually put it on as a more robust discussion among some of the town folks who are all trying to manage this kind of complex, convoluted issue. So I will share that as part of the discussion today, I reached out to Town Administrator's Office and requested Town Council opinion. I'm going to actually take 1 second, sorry, and promote Ms. Houston and Mr. Rumbacher to the panel. Because we have what appears to be as a non-attorney board member trying to read rules, regs, and everything else, some kind of overlapping and conflicting language in the regulations. So obviously noisome trades, no noise, odor, dust, all clearly fall under Board of Health responsibility under 111-31C. Littleton is a right to farm community. So that as part of that there is a shift of some oversight and dispute resolution responsibilities from Select Board, Planning, Zoning, and Board of Health to Agricultural Commission, assuming there's not some other piece involved. So if I have my farm and there's an odor from manure, that is a normal operating odor from my farm, and under right to farm, that is not an immediate life threat. It's not an immediate urgent public health concern unless it's contaminating something. So the Board of Health, while traditionally would have authority under right to farm, that would shift to Agricultural Commission to try to mitigate and resolve that challenge. For those who don't know, Littleton has adopted the model right to farm regulation as town bylaw under bylaw 90 under our town bylaws. So, which are pretty clear of how that description goes. Complaints for any of those issues can go to the Select Board, the zoning enforcement officer, which here in Littleton is the building commissioner, or the Board of Health. Any one of those groups can then obviously act if it's within their scope, or defer. So for us, if it's not a public health, an imminent public health or urgent public health issue, we can defer that investigation and mitigation and mitigation to agriculture. Any of those groups, again, can take action if needed, or goes to agriculture as a right to farm community. There's also a under the community host agreement with Sanctuary, there's language that any complaints that they receive should be reported to planning and the zoning enforcement officer, with the zoning enforcement officer making the decision of what action should or will be taken, again, probably at their discretion, whether that is then therefore referred to another board, another enforcement authority, or if it simply stops at the zoning enforcement officer, building commissioner in our case. So we've got signs of overlapping that a host community agreement doesn't preempt right to farm bylaw or Mass General Law 111-31 Charlie. So seems to be some confusion as to who is the reporting authority, who is the receiving authority of complaint, who is the group or groups with enforcement or mitigation authority. So again, not being an attorney, only playing one on LCTV once every 2 weeks. I've put the request back to the small groups. So Mr. Rombacher, Mr. Houston, a few other folks on email chain that I was included today, to town administrator for town council interpretation of how do these apparently on the surface potentially conflicting or overlapping pieces, how do we address them how do we address them from a legal regulatory piece, and how do we operationalize them for the community and for town hall, with, if I get a call from someone, who is the correct person to refer it to so that the appropriate action can be taken. And I'm going to stop for a moment after all that and see if Ms. Houston and Mr. Rombacher was my kind of summary of kind of where we are and how we got here this evening, close to on mark. Did I miss anything major? And open it up to kind of the process and some of the questions that folks had.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
All right, great. So Anna Houston, here as both a resident who really is frustrated with the odor that has been happening for years over there at the area around Sanctuary, and as a planning board member. So I would just like to add to what you just said that as an example, you were just talking about the planning board having the deadlines of when documents are presented. I think that's fairly new, and I would really like to see that working properly. But we received, for example, changes to sanctuary materials, even the same day of at our last meeting. And that was not acceptable to me. So I really wanted to make sure that we kept the public hearing opened and so that we could get additional information. And what my frustration came into this, and that is that it is not clear based off of what I saw in the proposed decision and what we have in the odor management plan and what people believe to be correct in town hall, that there's so much ambiguity that I really wanted us to kind of take a step back and say, okay, so how is this process actually going to work? If you take a look, and so my question to you all is, can you please be a part of this process? Because I have asked, well, you know, what exactly does this process entail and who is going to be the lead on it? And then what is the process moving forward from that? I wasn't getting answers. So that's why I came to you, Mr. Chair. So thank you for having us here. In the odor management plan, there is a 24/7 toll-free hotline. And so what's supposed to happen with those phone calls? Honestly, I'd rather see the calls come to somebody in town so that we can go ahead and keep track of that and then figure out what to do with those calls, right? So that's one thing. Who should be contacted, as you said. And then the second thing is the threshold. I know that they're supposed to be conducting formal surveys using the odor jar kits a couple times a week. And on page 18 of their odor management plan, it says that they will report to Littleton Board of Health periodically at a frequency agreed to with the Board of Health on its effort to address offsite odor complaints. So I didn't know. So they do this odor jar kit and they have the formal surveys done. Do you then discuss those with them at these interval meetings? What then happens with that information? How is it used? So as you can see, I'm just very uncomfortable with where we are right now. And I would like to engage the Board of Health to please provide direction where it's appropriate. And that's my ask. Those two things. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Davis, go ahead.
News to me on the odor control plan. I don't recall it coming before this board to review or place comment on or anything like that. So that would be my first comment for that. And if I missed it because I was a different meeting, you know, or missed the meeting, that's you know, bad on me. But the second thing is that if the host agreement has an error in it, maybe we should revisit the host agreement and correct the error so that the reporting is done appropriately. And then finally, the 800 number, again, news to me. Haven't heard anything about it. They said that they were going to put on their webpage a number to call so that those things would be routed to them when there was a problem and things like that. And I said, well, that's a good start. I gave them some feedback about how to make the number dialable. So that way you could, when you go to the web page, you can click on it with your cell phone. It would automatically go out and dial off of that page. But that was pretty much all the discussion that we had. There wasn't anything else really brought into my recollection. And that's just my comments. But I'm ready to work with you.
So I see your hand, Mr. Remember, 1 second. So most week we certainly have heard intermittent concerns. I know Jim has gone out on regular basis and occasionally will notice some odor and sometimes not. We honest, I have not seen their full odor mitigation plan. And actually, as Mr. Davis was talking, I just went to our Board of Health, Department of Health shared OneCloud site, and I don't see it there, although I may just be missing it. So I'm not sure if Jim or Brenda has seen that. So I think that's something, again, that we just need to make sure that from an operational piece, and I'll be honest, as a department, we are 3 weeks old as a department, so that our level of operationality is still in its infancy. You know, we haven't had a town planner in place for years. We've had a local health director now for literally 3 weeks, 4 weeks. So, and Jim, awesome, but again, he's only so many hands in so many places, so that it is a little bit different. So one, I think we do want to agree. I definitely agree. And then a quick aside, just so we don't miss it, for Brenda and Francis, can we see if we can get a copy of the odor mitigation plan from Sanctuary or from our files someplace, and share it out and put it on our shared drive just so we have access to it as members of the board? All right, sorry, Mr. Rombacher, I apologize for the delay. Go ahead, sir.
So, Ms. Houston probably can clarify this, but I would guess the odor mitigation plan is on the planning board website currently, under the sanctuary stuff, under, what's it, 234 Taylor Street. So
Correct.
Also a clarification to what Mr. Davis said earlier, I think it's the special permit that talks about the odor mitigation and not the host community agreement. So that's what the planning board is currently negotiating. From my perspective, as the special permit is currently written, it says it's the building inspector's job to do the odor mitigation, or the odor, respond if there's a odor at Sanctuary. If it's the health agent or whomever it is, makes no difference to me, as long as there's a way of the residents knowing who to contact. Right, it's very clear who they're going to contact. We have a way of tracking the incoming requests. You know, it's information that people should end up being able to FOIA or get through some website. And the other is we have the potential, you know, to bill Sanctuary every time we go out there. So that's the other reason we'd like to be able to track it too. It would be nice to know. We need to make it easier for the residents to report problems and know that their problems are being addressed. And then we need to know how often there are problems, and, you know, from a real perspective. So that's where I'm coming from on this. And if it's the Board of Health, the health department or the building department or some combination, makes no difference to me, as long as we can clearly tell people where to go. Because right now we're telling them to go in 3 or 4 different directions and no one knows what the right answer is. So.
I think if I can, I think that's kind of where it brings us back to the request of town council that, you know, and simply if I'm not sure who has responsibility. Right to Farm was out long before cannabis was an option. The Right to Farm bylaw does not exclude cannabis from it. And again, I have not been able to dig in since the email this morning too deep. Yeah, are there any other regulations that pull cannabis out of Right to Farm? Even though it's not in the Right to Farm language, is it in the cannabis language that Right to Farm doesn't apply? Once some place is in place and has gotten their zoning and those pieces in place of how that works. So this, again, the question really could be, odor could be us as odor in general, because in general, it would be us. Under Right to Farm, it is, if it is public health risk. If it is not public health risk and it's simply part of normal, and I don't have it pulled up at the moment, but the Right to Farm regulation is really broad. Any cultivation of any type, of anything, of any product package, all this stuff, which without saying cannabis would appear on the surface to apply, unless some of the cannabis language has pulled it out of that, which would place it in agriculture's responsibility. So again, that host agreement or odor mitigation plan is a whole separate piece, which doesn't necessarily fall under Right to Farm or the Board of Health responsibilities under Mass General laws. So part of me is curious, is that as part of that negotiated agreement between the town and Sanctuary, that referring back to what boards and authorities have control over certain aspects, that basically another layer was added in as a contract agreement outside of existing town bylaw and state law. So we kind of almost have added another layer into that mix, no matter how Right to Farm works. If Right to Farm doesn't apply to cannabis, well, then it's back to an odor complaint that falls under Board of Health. So I think we really need town council to like go, where are our lines, and how that host or agreement between planning and sanctuary have come about, and whether those town bylaws and state laws were incorporated into or thought of during that negotiation. I simply don't know, because we weren't part of that negotiation. That is really a planning and select board and petitioner piece that we were never part of that process.
Right, so,
the first we've
right. So I'll just add that town council and the council for sanctuary have been all over that special permit. There was a long discussion about the proper reporting structure at the last planning board meeting, but it was more about whether sanctuary should be in the initial contact or if it was covered by normal state regulations. The right to farm regulation was not at all discussed.
and perhaps it doesn't apply, that piece. I simply don't know. I can't speak to our town council. Certainly I've been in towns in the past where great, smart, very talented and conscientious town councils simply aren't always as attuned to public health law as they are other parts of town law, simply because public health law is at a town level, is still a very specific scope of practice that is not necessarily in a kind of a generalist town council piece. I simply don't know if that ever came up on their radar as they were functioning as our representative as part of that negotiation. I know I saw their hand. I think Kevin Davis, I think I saw your hand. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I specifically asked a question when they were in the last time talking to us about cultivation. And they specifically said that their facility does not have cultivation happening in it. So confirm, Mr. Rombacher or Ms. Houston, if that is correct. And if that's correct, they're totally just a processing facility. That is not growing, right? Cultivation of the cultivar of cannabis would be then they would fall in my opinion, playing a lawyer on TV, that would fall into that. There's some other things that I read in other states from like Michigan and Colorado and California, where they have also right to farm laws as well that are very similar to Massachusetts. And basically, if you're cultivating cannabis, then that you fall under the right to farm regulations. If you're just processing it, that's a completely different ball of wax. So correct me if I'm wrong.
Their current facility is, I believe they are a cultivator. What they're adding is just processing.
Oh, okay. So they are actually,
yeah. But I would also say that they're probably, I would guess that their special permit and whatever they agreed to in their special permit supersedes any right to farm law. Since it specifically calls out odor mitigation, I would guess that the specifics override the general bylaw. If you didn't have something in there, I would guess that you would fall back to the general, but there is something specific in there about odor. So I would guess that the contract itself is much more specific and override something since it calls it out.
Okay.
I'm playing a lawyer on TV.
So one of the things that comes to mind as I hear you talking, Mr. Davis, is that it seems that the odor management plan is something, correct me if I'm wrong, that the odor management plan should have been reviewed by the Board of Health. And the fact that it hasn't really concerns me. I guess I thought it had been reviewed by you all. Then I request if your board could please send a letter to the planning board that says we need to pause while you all take a look at this plan.
Mr. Baker, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe they did come in front of us with a slide deck. It was about 200 pages, and it was to show us the addition they're going to be building and the new systems they're going to be putting into that building, as well as what they were going to replace in their existing building with the new systems and the new carbon filters that are supposedly going to do a lot of the work for the odor mitigation. The jury's out on that because they're not in place. in the existing building, and we don't know how well they're going to work when they do get installed. They did put together that dashboard that Mr. Davis, I remember you liked.
Oh,
I
I
thought it was neat.
reviewed
And-
it right then and
and-
there. Yeah.
Yeah, and they could do a little better on it maybe, but that I think was the jar business that Anna was talking about, where they do the smell test and they everybody sees how strong they can smell first, and then they walk around and figure out where the odor is and how strong that person determines the scent is at that specific location, and that information goes into the dashboard. We haven't seen all that work yet either.
And the dashboard. Sorry, sir. Go ahead.
No, so they presented us with a plan in theory. We don't know how well it's going to work.
This odor management plan is 66 pages long.
We didn't see
Okay,
that.
the document that we saw, it was a number of pages. I don't know exactly how many. Mr. Wason, maybe you recall. Dr. Wason, sorry. But what I was going to say just before that was that I think that it's okay if we funnel in all the complaints to the health department and have our department be the main contact for such odor complaints and nuisance complaints regarding the facility. And I am also okay with our health director or his assignee, his or her assignee, being the enforcement agency for said complaint, as long as we can all work together and come to a common agreement on what we all would like to see happen.
Dr. Wason, go ahead.
Yes, we have received the odor management plan. Yes, we met and talked about it. No, I don't think any of us, except for Jim, read the 66 pages, partly because I think it was presented to our board not as something we actually had jurisdiction over, but was a request for review, which I felt was different. And it was quite pointed that in our discussion, the sanctuary representatives more than once said that they were not in front of us for any requirement, but as a courtesy. And so I think maybe that set this whole process up on the wrong foot potentially. And I think I remember Jim, like maybe a year ago, a long time ago, saying, should the board have more formal authority before a problem happens, such as design review of some facility that is likely to produce odor? And I don't recall the answer, but I think it was kind of like not very precedent, and I'm not sure. But in this case, we had the plan. Jim did review it. Jim has notes on it. And so we had some discussion around it and kind of approved it because it seemed like a good enough plan, and we forwarded that kind of approval onto the planning board, I thought, to say, this has our stamp. We asked for a few things. The dashboard is weak because it requires manual updating, and some of the customer complaint stuff isn't quite as easy as we wanted it to be for community members. But I see kind of two halves. One is the pre-build, which is where we are for this new facility. And that is, how much does the Board of Health have purview over that? And like I said, I think we felt like we were not responsible, or that was not in our jurisdiction to actually be hard on that. And then the other piece is the post, which is the nuisance portion of it, which I think we have historically been totally okay with owning. And that's what I'm hearing from my fellow board members tonight. But I think also Jim might have some other input to provide as well, maybe. Because I go back to the how do we handle the new thing, and should the Board of Health have some say over design where we think there could be a problem, and do we actually have authority to do that? And I'm not sure from 111 if that's actually included, or if it's all really looking post problem.
Mr. Davis, I'm going to ask you to hold on for one moment. Mr. Graffi, go ahead.
Sure. So, and unfortunately, my screen is frozen, so I hope you can hear me. I'm not sure.
We can.
Okay, good. So, a couple of things. First, when the board met, it was to discuss the conditions of the special permit in front of the planning board. And that presentation that they provided, in fact, as Dr. Wason mentioned, included the odor plan that they had in there. And I think amongst the things that the board asked the planning board, or in their notes to the planning board, was to require that their plans require a third-party HVAC engineer review, because none of us sitting on the board really understand the interplay between the odor, all the different rooms that they have in the facility, and the different treatment equipment that they were providing. So that was a concern of ours. It all looked good on paper, but I can't really tell you if it's A, enough equipment, if it's B, funneling and channeling the air in the appropriate manner. So again, that was the recommendation, part of the recommendations to the planning board was third-party review by an HVAC mechanical engineer.
Thank you, Jim. Kevin Davis, go ahead.
Thank you, sir. I do recall receiving the presentation and everything like that, but I do not recall reviewing all 61 pages of that odor mitigation at all. It may have been mentioned in there, and I don't recall that being in the packet, so that's maybe on me or whatever. But having received and talked to Mr. Rombacher about some of the nuisance odors, I knew I was looking for that particular part in there to make sure that it was handled appropriately. And again, in my opinion, because we have an electronic system that when, like if the office department receives a notification, I think we could start to log, whatever policy or procedure they want to put in place to do that. I think there's an electronic version of that already that maybe we can put something in place in the e-system that the town uses to fill out a complaint form or something like that. But I agree. I think the Board of Health should be the one receiving the calls about the nuisance odors.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
So currently, the complaints come to my office. There are a handful of residents in that area who have my email address and will email me when there are concerns of odor. And we try to get up there as close to the time that they're experiencing the odor to try to document the odor. And sometimes it works out very well, and sometimes we miss it. And so, again, I've been receiving emails from residents in that neighborhood for quite a long time. And I have actually provided them as FOIA requests to other people. And again, we continue to receive those complaints. One of the things that was in the sanctuary's paperwork was the Cannabis Control Commissions require that they comply with the air pollution regulations. And the Board of Health has jurisdiction under the air pollution regulations to enforce that. The state regs, 310 CMR 7, and in that set of regulation, DEP allows boards of health, fire departments, and police departments to enforce those regulations. And that's really what we've been using to consider odor complaints. So again, we continue to receive complaints. What we ask people to do is tell us when it's happening so we can try to narrow the time when we go up there and experience the complaints. If we can experience those complaints, I have emailed the facility in the past saying, hey, you got an issue going on. Can you take a look and see what's happening? The board has met with Sanctuary before when there were kind of a grouping of complaints. So the board has been involved with Sanctuary to try to get them to mitigate the odors to the furthest extent possible.
Sorry, I was on mute. I apologize. Miss Houston, go ahead.
So I think in hearing all of this, because I don't know, maybe you know, in an ideal world, this odor management plan and on the website and on our town site, there would be one piece of paper, like a flow chart that just says, do you have a complaint, an odor complaint? This is the process that you follow. This is what will happen. That would be the most ideal thing so that our residents have comfort in knowing that that the town has their back and that they know that if they do X, then Y will happen. And I don't know if that's part of your role or is it part of the planning board's role that we need to put into the document that's part of the decision. So if you have thoughts on that, I would appreciate that.
Any members of the board have any thoughts? Mr. Davis, go ahead.
So again, I definitely think the Board of Health should be the ones receiving that. Flow chart. It's a pretty, it's, you know, start button says, do you have a nuisance odor? Call planning board. And I that's my opinion on it. I don't know how the other ones are, but that's where I feel. And I did say Board of Health. I did say Board of Health.
I thought you said planning board.
Right. Call Board of Health. Sorry. My fault. All of a sudden, everybody got really quiet. I was like, oh no, I said it wrong.
Dr. Wason, go ahead.
Do we need to work on a nuisance reporting mechanism because there are current problems, or because they are trying to build a new facility and it's tied to this special permit?
Both. So
Okay.
there have been ongoing complaints now for 6 years. In fact, as I understand from a resident who contacted me yesterday, Mr. Greffy was out there for one yesterday. So this is an ongoing thing, and we want to try to be able to make it very clear and simple for residents to be able to make their complaints, making that public if at all possible, and that everybody understands what the mechanism is by which this odor is being judged, and then that there are consequences based off of, you know, what's happening. I mean, the ideal world is this, that everything they say that they are doing to the existing building and their new build out is going to solve the odors. Terrific, fabulous. But if it doesn't, we need to be ready to act on behalf of the residents.
And I think that's where I see that I would like to see it kind of segregate a little bit more, because we have existing complaints, existing structures that we as a board have been pushing to have better resolution of. And a part of that should be nuisance reporting. I think none of us really realized how disheveled that portion was until now. So I would say that's work that has started and should be ongoing, that we've owned, I think, and would have no problem continuing to own. The piece of the special permit, I would look to you to say, if there's something you need from us or you want to include with our input, then let's have another hearing about that to say, this is specifically what is asked of the Board of Health, because I need to be clear if what you want in the special permit is, we want odors reasonably controlled right now. We want a better nuisance reporting system live. We want XYZ, because without that specific ask of us, I think I don't know where we would then just go. We could keep trying to have them make promises, like you mentioned. Oh, when we build this new thing, this will all get incrementally better. If I think we approach that to say, okay, that sounds good enough to us. We can't prove that's not true. Like Jim said, we want that outside engineer review to help us understand that. But I guess I just want to make sure we're really clear on what the special permit is asking of the board, or do you just want to provide your words that you've provided and the input to say, we will now push harder and focus and try to get the nuisance reporting process as one component definitely nailed down better. And I think taking that back to Sanctuary for our own Board of Health public hearing would be a necessary next step. Does that make sense?
Through the chair. So to answer your question, Dr. Wason, I'm here, and I first started out talking to Chair Kane as a resident, feeling like this is just, you know, ongoing. And then as a planning board member, feeling like I don't think that we've nailed this yet to come to a decision that's on paper and signed by the planning board members. So I would very much like to include the Board of Health in what we're doing, because I see this as a very collaborative process between your new department, your board, between the planning department, the planning board, and even the select board members, because the new health manager now is part of that town administrative process. So I think we need to be working together on this. And quite frankly, I feel like I have been precluded from doing so because when I ask questions, they get stopped, and I don't want that to continue.
Chair privilege for a moment. I certainly, I hope you aren't addressing that to us, because I realize, I hope we expressed our concern pretty quickly as our communication, and I think you reached out over the weekend, and we're now in face-to-face ish on Wednesday. So I hope you hear
you've
that we
been
are
great.
taking this seriously, and we are trying to be proactive. And so I just want to make sure that we're not missing something, that we haven't missed stuff in the background that we weren't aware of or should have been. So
I don't believe so. But what I would say is, it would be extremely helpful to the overall process in this is if Sanctuary has its continued public hearing next Thursday, April 4th, if somebody from this board could be there. Because again, if we are to work together, we can't keep working in silos, because some people will attend one meeting, some people will attend another meeting. It's just helpful to have representation, if you will. So if you could, that would be great.
If I could, but that's kind of what I'm getting at. Is there something specific that you would like this board to deliver? Obviously, with one member there, it's not our board. So I guess we could ask some questions, but that wouldn't be necessarily expert or
let me ask
universal
this.
opinion.
So if I were to ask for a joint meeting, would you be amenable to that? And I can go back to the chair and ask for that as well.
I mean, I'm okay with the joint meeting. That changes the scenario, right? So that does provide our board, but I would still say, like, just so we're clear going into it, what can we do in advance to make sure we're prepared to address concerns, questions, whatever it might be? I think that's where I'm still a little unsure. And we've talked about the odor mitigation plan. Maybe the next step is for actually us to have our own public hearing with Sanctuary to readdress that per the request of the planning board or the select board or whoever it might be. Just what clarifications do we need to get, or what exact approvals would you want to see, I guess? But lots of hands.
Okay, so I'm going to play air traffic control here for a second. I'm going to go to Mr. Rombacher first, and then Mr. Baker.
So I would say that the planning board decision is what's been discussed. It's on the website now. It's dated, the decision I think is dated February 29th. Section 20 specifically calls out the odor, what happens if an odor is reported, right? It's the entire process. So your board should review that, right? Or your health agent or someone should review that and make sure that you agree with what that process is. Then there's the odor management plan that your board, it sounds like your board may have reviewed, but there are questions on that may or may not have been addressed. So that's something else that you should come be ready to discuss at the planning board meeting. If, to know that you ask questions about the HVAC system, has it been properly peer reviewed, and you can ask your questions of the peer reviewer or see what the responses were. Those would be my two. Ms. Houston might have others, but those are the ones that immediately pop into my head.
Thank you. Yes, so those two, I totally agree. And then the third one again is based on your role as the Board of Health, is there odor jar kit reasonable and appropriately measurable for what you need? In other words, how are you going to know when a violation has occurred? Is it just the complaints? Okay, if it's just the complaints, that's one thing. But if it's actually something else more quantitative, then I don't believe that's been substantiated in their odor management plan. But again, I'm not a Board of Health expert, so that's part of it.
If I could, before we get back to Kevin, and I think none of these board members are odor management plan experts either. And so I think based on this is making it clear. I think this goes back to, we got the document. We asked that the planning board consider having the outside engineer look at it. And I think we're right back to that. I think that what we need is that outside engineer to review these plans and actually give an expert recommendation back to us as a board that says, yay, great idea, B, we need to make some changes. That way we can give you a more firm answer for the next round which is, I think, a different ground than we kind of went into the first one.
No, that's yeah, Mr. Baker. I have not forgotten. I'm going to say that I think just to reinforce Mr. Wason, that piece of it came before us as basically a consult prior to planning. That this was a planning process. It came for us for input to planning of what if any, additional feedback, input, suggestions, etc., that the Board of Health would provide to the planning board to support their process of granting or not granting the expansion. And that feedback was, it needs a professional engineer to evaluate the plans that is beyond the scope of this board's expertise to be able to do that. So I don't know, again, and we've not heard back. We've made the recommendation. We've not heard back of where in that process that is or has happened. So we simply can't answer what's happened or whether those are adequate, because we basically said, we don't know if these are adequate. We need a professional engineer, and that needs to be part of that was our recommendation to planning, that be part of your approval or disapproval or change process, to include that and get that feedback from an outside expert. So,
and just a clarification, Mr. Chair. So the only thing that has been peer reviewed has been the typical planning board things like site plan. The HVAC is one of the things that is a condition of approval. And it's just the HVAC piece. There has been no review of the odor management plan. In other words, it did not go out for peer review.
okay. I did not forget you, Mr. Baker. I'm sorry. Please go ahead.
Oh, no, thanks. It's been all great comments, Dr. Wason. I was going to piggyback on what you had mentioned regarding the HVAC system being peer reviewed. And that, I mean, the HVAC system is 90% of the odor mitigation plan. And that's what we need a professional to come in and tell us. Is this going to work?
And that has not happened.
And that's what we need to happen. They haven't come back to us. I don't know if they've done it. I don't know if anybody's looked into the vendor for that or who is the professional. I know at our meeting, we had given some options, but we haven't seen anything since then. I think one thing that we can do to help between now and the next meeting is putting into place a process for by which nuisance complaints can come in regarding odor, come into the health department, be processed, be made public knowledge, be attached to the parcel of land, be CC'd to the necessary stakeholders involved to make sure everything's open, transparent for the public. I think that's really important. I think that's the one thing we're missing, because the complaint process has been so diffracted and it's gone in so many different directions that we can't unscramble that egg right now. We can't go back and figure out where and when all those complaints happened. So I think we can, and Mr. Day will correct me if I'm wrong, I think we can put that process in place fairly quickly with the help of our support staff.
That would be wonderful. Thank you.
Gino, go ahead, sir.
I understand. I heard Anna and also Jeffrey. I appreciate that. The question is, as Anna mentioned, several, maybe even more than that. They approached me. They said, "Gino, you're in the Board of Health." I said, "Yes, I have a problem. I can't smell that odor anymore. What should I do?" I told them, says, "Write to the Board of Health," and then we get the attorney and they check it, and then will be Giraffe will make a comment, and Anna will do a comment, and the board altogether will make a comment. If the odor is very bad, and it is, that's why we are in the Board of Health. We want to make sure that nobody gets sick. That's it. Because some people can get sick if it's a terrible odor. That is my, thank you, Anna. Thank you, Giraffe. I appreciate it.
All right, thank you, Gino. Kevin Davis, did you have your hand? Yeah.
Yeah, then this is to go back to my review of the webpage that was there. The webpage, the review that I gave to them was that it was more like a wireframe static web page. Everything in there was filled out on the page itself. The web page was created by Wix. So there was a whole lot of things that on that web page that I basically told them that this is not how you would want to present a professional page to go off and do this. You need to be tying this into the systems so that they're automatically updated. The logging on the bottom is just wrong. I told them like the date is twisted around. There's no way to correlate between the systems that are active at the top to the time that something was there and reviewed and all that kind of good stuff. So you can go back and play the tape. And as a side note, I am that kind of engineer. So they got a really good review, a cursory review, a 10-minute review on that. And I told them to come back again, and I'll be more than happy to look at it again and to give them more information that was there. So.
All right, so let's see what we can do about pulling this all back together and see if we can come up with at least a short-term plan. So we've got obviously lots of moving pieces here. We've got odor complaints in general out there that need a consistent, whether it's from Sanctuary or from any other source in town, a consistent process. And I think the most consistent, since most odor complaints, taking Sanctuary out of this mix, would go to either most likely the fire department, because they answer every call anyway, and odor is always one of those ones that I don't know what it's, I have a weird smell. That's just how it is. Short of the fire department or having them refer it back to us afterwards, assuming it's not life safety, natural gas kind of stuff, is odors would fall under Board of Health responsibility and authority. So I think short term, if it makes sense, that we make the recommendation that odor complaints in general, Sanctuary or others, come through the health department and then triaged from there as appropriate, whether that's a health agent going out inspecting, whether that sounds like natural gas and I'm going to refer to the fire department, or some other action is deemed appropriate short term. I think that's pretty consistent across the board for 99% of odor complaints. Sanctuary, again, we're not quite sure with, it's a farm, it's an odor source, and there's also the special agreement under that as well of which one it falls under and how, that we need to figure out which is the overriding legal authority, which one wins. Does the contract win? Does the bylaw win? Does the state law win? Which one has supremacy as far as enforcement and action? But we're not going to get that answer today. But I think even if it came to, and again, interrupt me anytime here as I'm thinking this through, if complaints continue to come to the Board of Health or the health department as its primary receiving agency, if some combination of the agreement and right to farm say, nope, it's not immediate public health risk, it should go to agriculture, or nope, this is an order complaint that has been negotiated as part of the, I apologize, it's out of my head, I'm going to say special project waiver, but I know it's not a special project waiver. The medical side of my brain is going, it's like that, but it's not. That somehow that takes supremacy as far as regulatory and monitoring. It can still come to the Board of Health and then go, okay, it's Sanctuary, it's not immediate public health risk. We're now referring this to another agency and not, basically be a bit of a gatekeeper flow manager as complaints or reports come in. I think that seems reasonable, as long as that seems a reasonable workflow for Brenda and Francis and Jim as the professional staff who are going to be fielding those calls and responding and triaging them. That no matter what with Sanctuary comes back from town council or any other agreements, it still seems like a reasonable triage process. Is that from the board and from the paid professional staff and planning and select board? I recognize you're not speaking for your boards, but in general, does that seem like a reasonable, at least short-term process so that we can deliver a consistent message to everyone? Odor complaint, assuming you don't think it's a dead body or natural gas, goes to the Board of Health, and again, preferably the phone number, only because emails can take a while and can get missed, so that we can try to respond or triage in as timely a manner as possible. Does that seem like a reasonable short term?
Yes, and I think making it clear will be really helpful. Yes, thank you.
Francis, Jim, Brenda, does that seem okay from a workflow side of answer the phone call and either acting or triaging to the appropriate body from a workflow side and a logic side from the professional side?
So I currently have a handful of people who send me emails. Would you like me to redirect them to calling the Board of Health office?
I get that. I don't know. I'm not that for me.
Okay.
As long as we find out about it in a timely manner, and it's as long as they're able to share it in a timely manner, and we are able to receive it in a timely manner. So, for example, I know for a while our health at Littleton, Mass mailbox wasn't being monitored as frequently as it probably should have been. So I just want to make sure that we have a way that if they report in a timely manner, that we're also able to receive it and act upon it in as timely a manner as possible.
Certainly.
Dr.
I'll
Weiss,
work
go
with-
ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Sorry about that.
Jim, finish up your sentence. I apologize.
I'm sorry.
Dr. Wason.
So what I try to do always, if I'm doing a response, I try to include Brenda in it. And if I'm talking to a resident about following up on it, I try to include Brenda in the email that I'm sending out. So I'm trying to include her so that she has copies of those in the office.
Yep. No, thank you so much. Dr. Wason, go ahead.
Phone's great. I would like to have potentially multiple methods, so that they can all get one place and tracked. So if somebody's just calling, leaving, or having a phone conversation, how are we going to document that in a central location that could also go with emails, et cetera, so that we have one source of data? And I'll surprise Francis to say we were talking earlier today about potential online nuisance reporting. Right, Francis? Nod your head. So we were talking kind of about the same kind of thing, just in general nuisance complaints, making sure that whatever method they get to us by, we are trying to then store them in a single system so that we can at least then find them. So I don't care if it's email, I don't care if it's OpenGov, I don't care what it is. I just don't want it to be while you are out Post-its next to some other computer system. So that if it is a phone call, great. Does that turn into an email for record keeping? And whatever it might be, on our webpage, we have all of the options available to that individual, because some are going to want to be able to click submit a nuisance form, some are going to want to email, and some are going to want to call. I would say Jim and Francis figure out how you want the first interaction to be. As a board, I don't want to decide that. You guys figure out how you want to get that input, and then I would ask, where are you going to store it so that you can then report to this board and say, we got X many complaints over this period of time. Does that sound cool?
Works for me.
Mr. Davis, go ahead.
I would like to pile on to what Dr. Wason and Mr. Baker had talked about, which is basically use that eGov system that we have to figure out some process to catalog everything and have it in one place. So that way we can get the accurate reports on tied to property. So that way we know, hey, we got 7,250,000 reports in 3 seconds over this stuff over there. You know, that kind of granularity would be much appreciated.
Question for probably Jim and Brenda at the moment. Do we have a logging system that if I make a phone call, that do we track phone calls or emails, complaints, just that same piece of, do we have a database that we've gotten 15 calls and pull down menus? So order complaint or noise or inspection question or whatever, food poison, whatever it happens to be. Do we have a logging system for public contact with us so that we can in fact pull up, okay, we've had 15 cases, kind of the same way that you do root cause for foodborne illness. You start looking back. Do we have a logging system for reports and calls and contacts in general so that we could in fact go, how do we know how many odor complaints we've gotten, for example, from an address or a business or whatever it is, without trying to go back and look at emails, because that's never going to capture everything unless you're sending an email every time you get a phone call.
So I guess I'll just add, for the odors, it is an email system, because what we generally ask is them to give us time, date, when they smell it, any kind of duration. So we don't really have a database of it, but I save all the emails and they're searchable. And again, I've provided those as public records request as requested. Again, it's when we're dealing with odor complaints, we're trying to kind of formulate, is there an issue here and when is that issue, so we can go out and actually document the issue. So if the issue is occurring, the board can take the next step and either call them in for a hearing, issue an order. So that's been the practice.
Francis, your hand's up. Sorry, sir.
So this case is a little separate, but in general, I'm already working on a complaint intake electronically that anybody will be able to apply through any channel.
Awesome. Great. Yep. No, tracking is data is power. So, all right, Mr. Rumbacher, I did see your hand up. I apologize for that. Go ahead, sir.
Just a quick thing is just to make sure that the email doesn't go to a specific person, right? It shouldn't be Jim's email address or Francis or Brenda's email address, because if they're on vacation, we're going to miss them, right? So I don't know how you guys want to handle it, but just make sure whatever public is posted is an email address that can be monitored by multiple people.
And we do have a generic health@Littleton email address, and I do know Brenda should now have access to it. There was, when Brenda started, there was some challenges getting access to it, but Brenda should have access to it now. I'm hoping, I'm going to look for Francis to nod his head. Francis, you should have access to that email address and are monitoring it as well. Thank you very much. Jim, I'm not sure about, as an outside agency, if our IT folks gave you the health@Littleton email access. Did they? Matt's nodding his head, so yeah.
Yeah.
It has been historically monitored only by Jim. Now it is Jim and Francis.
Yeah.
And whoever else.
Awesome. All right. So yeah, I knew there was initially some challenges, but yeah, it sounds like that has been resolved. So I think in general, an email address, that would be the recommended. It is the one listed, even with like the DEP and EPA and stuff, for any contact with the board. It goes to that generic email box so that it's not dependent on someone being in the office or on vacation, or a change in position and suddenly they're not checking their email here in town anymore and it's lost. So okay, so we got some big challenges, but I think this has made at least some forward progress. I think the last two pieces probably are looking forward to feedback from planning and their process with the expert engineers side as part of their permitting process for the HVAC and odor, because they are the ones with the authority as part of the negotiation for the building expansion at the moment. And how do we share? And again, we can kind of probably do this a little bit offline, of just how do we make sure we can share with town leadership and contacts, so that as things come into town hall or around town, that how can we make sure we give a consistent message to folks within town hall and in the community, that the reporting process for really is noise, odor, and dust all fall under Board of Health, at least as a starting point. Doesn't mean that's where it's going to stay, but as a starting point under, that's noise, odor, and dust is usually starts with boards of health and health agents. So I'm just not sure doing that is, other than certainly we can share it through town administrator's office and ask them to share it out to. Again, I'm not sure. I'm not in town hall. How communication within town hall occurs is outside of my scope and purview, but we can certainly make the request to the town administrator's office, share what we've thought about tonight, and allow them to take action as they deem appropriate to communicate to town employee staff. And then, so from a Board of Health perspective, we can make sure that we can perhaps put out a thing on our website for the reporting process. You got a complaint about any of the dozens of things that boards of health can be complained to about. This is how you can do that. I think from our side, so those are probably the two pieces that we can do. We can control our website and put that out there as a process, and let town administrator know this is the recommendation at the moment, and see how they would like to share it within town hall. Any other thoughts from the board or our guests tonight about that piece of just how do we operationalize what we've talked about tonight in the short term?
Sounds good. Thank you very much for the thoughtfulness.
Right.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you both for being here tonight. We appreciate it. All right. Any other? Was that a wave, Mr. Baker, or was that a hand? That was a wave. Okay, good. All right, so that wraps up that piece of our evening. Administrative matters. We actually talked briefly about this already, that, and Francis has kind of already started a little bit here of kind of coming up with a logging and tracking system as things come into the office so that we can pull it back. I was able to go back and look at the meeting packet from my email from January 28th. And see obviously the slide presentation, but then also the mitigation plan that was part of that. I admit we all have our own filing systems, and I don't want to mess up anybody's filing system because then they'll never be able to file anything ever again. But is there a way that we can perhaps utilize the shared folder under OneDrive to make it maybe perhaps a little bit more user-friendly for the board? So for example, if I want to go look at something for Sanctuary, I don't know if we can come up with a standard, at least a share, so we're not looking through meeting packets for an odor mitigation plan or a hearing result or those kind of things. Looking through meeting packets is not really timely or practical. And certainly if it's been an ongoing, we may be looking at 5 or 6 packets. If it was I'm going to just pick on them for the moment because we're not here tonight. But if I was looking at 25 to 31 Stevens, I'm going to be looking through 4 or 5 or 6 meeting packets to try to get all the pieces that came out of that. Can we build into OneDrive, whether it is by type or by organization or address or some combination, can we have a Sanctuary folder? So we've got their PowerPoint presentation from the meeting and their odor mitigation plan and reports of if you've gone out and done a site visit, those kind of things. And that, so we can pull up, hey, there's a problem with Sanctuary. We can pull up the Sanctuary folder and at least have everything in one place at one time, or odor mitigation plans all in one place. So I know that's where I look for no matter what the organization is. Inspections, all those kind of things that I know kind of live in lots of different places. I don't want to duplicate effort, but if I've generated a report, or in this case, we have an odor mitigation plan submitted, is there a way we can simply save it into that shared drive so that any of us elected staff or professional staff can pretty quickly and easily, like tonight, I can go, okay, I'm going to pop up on the OneDrive. I'm going to go to odor mitigation plan or Sanctuary or cannabis or whatever it is, and be able to get that information in a timely manner so that we can work with it and we're not digging. Not an overnight solution, but is that perhaps something we can work towards just to smooth that process? Same thing actually with minutes. When Ms. Houston actually asked me a question, I went back to look at the minutes of what we had decided from the January 28th meeting. We had approved the minutes, so they were off of the pending minutes folder in OneNote, but they weren't on the town website yet. So we had a gap. So I had to go back trying to look through my emails of what was in the email because it was pulled from the pending, but it hadn't arrived on the town website yet. Can we just simply keep a copy of our minutes, either draft version or approved version, in that OneDrive as well? It just seems like having it in one place under Board of Health or Health Department would seem helpful. Mr. Baker, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I think we should have a copy of everything in the OneDrive. The best way to organize it, Dr. Wason knows how to organize it.
Sorry,
you don't want to look.
So from a
He called on me, Kevin.
Oh, hold on. It was directed through the chair to Dr. Wason, so we're going to go with Dr. Wason.
Of course, I have an opinion, Kevin Baker. Yes, stuff can be put there. The concern has always been, and this is what drove the minutes process, is that we just have to be cautious because the official document has to be posted on the web for public access. So the choice is either A, also keep a copy on OneDrive, or B, have a process whereby Brenda just doesn't remove it from OneDrive until we've confirmed it's posted on the web. There is better search on the web than there used to be. So there's internal document searching. It's not his. So it is better. I agree. It's clunky if you actually know what day you're looking for. There's so many clicks to get to that file. So I would be in favor of having a section on OneDrive that stores those approved historical minutes. Like I said, we just have to be really careful that that can't be the last copy, because it has to be published online. Same thing. Yes, we can. There's nothing that says we can't store some of those other documents, like any sort of plan review stuff, or break up the meeting packet into folders by address. It can be done. It is an extra step because those are already emailed to us and posted online. So that's an ask for, okay, because fundamentally what it is Francis and Brenda, please take all of those meeting materials that you've collected, assembled for us, emailed to us in PDF, and now break them back apart or put those incremental pieces now into folders on OneDrive. So it's extra work, and you still have to, again, make sure that everything is in the original packet that's posted publicly, so that we don't have any sort of extra stuff on OneDrive. And of course, final caveat, no discussions. So it would just be a kind of informational resource. But yes, it would be much easier to find stuff if you're able to go to 234 Taylor Street -Sanctuary and find all those documents. Brenda's emailing them out currently.
And I just want to let the board know that I do keep my own copies on the M drive of everything. So in addition to sending them out, the packets are done by month and by date. And I compile all of the documents together and combine them into one packet. I do have them separately also, and then I combine them as one, because then I need to send them to you and then post it to the web. So I do have the information on the M drive as well. I know you don't have access to that, but Francis does, I do. And I guess we could add stuff to the OneDrive.
Maybe you can just copy it.
Yeah.
So,
Mr. Davis, go ahead.
from a technology perspective, one of the things that we need to make sure that we're doing is making sure that the PDFs are OCR and searchable. Currently, our PDFs are not, and they need to be, or sometimes they are and sometimes they're not. The reason why that needs to happen is so that way you can like search for those things. So once you post a PDF into OneDrive, OneDrive allows the search function to go into files that can be searchable. So it knows that like a PDF file is searchable or not. If it is searchable, it will actually go into the file and start looking for that information within it. So that is something very important to have, because the other thing, and I agree that, so think of it this way too, the OneDrive system that's there should be the information vessel that gets passed from one new board to the next board to the next board, so that the continuation of information is there and present, right? And if it is searchable for us to go do this, then that's exactly what you want to have happen. So if you guys want to run some experiments or do something like that, I'm all for it. I'm here to help. I kind of do this with other, federal, state, and local type stuff. So just let me know.
And this is the first time I've actually ever used OneDrive. I've never used it before, and the town does not use it. So we use the M drive to store everything. So
just to let you know, OneDrive is just a OneDrive from a PC perspective, and M is just a map device to a physical thing, right? Or a logical thing. Same thing. OneDrive can just be mapped to any letter or whatever it is. It doesn't matter. It's just where it's located in the world. And the IT people have full cognizance over all of that stuff. They have the ability to go, look at it and control it. So it's up to how your IT department does it. I'm not going to tell you how to run your department, but from a perspective, putting things up into the OneDrive allows board members to go in and see those things when we log in, and we're able to see that type of stuff. Whereas the M drive it gets ugly how we would get access to that drive. We'd have to like VPN into a special system and all this other. Let's try to use the technology that we have available and make the right decisions.
Sure. I'd need some help with that.
So yeah, to piggyback on what Kevin says, we don't have full control over the OCRness anyways, because the documents are not all created by us. So if somebody sends us a scanned document, then we can try to enable it, but we can only do so much. What I would say is we just make sure we're putting whatever original thing we have, so we're not doing any conversion that might get in the way. So if somebody sends us a PDF, we post a PDF. If somebody sends us a Word doc, we save the Word doc, whatever it might be, so that there's not additional processing or time spent on that. So I'm hearing that's what Brenda has already, right? She gets the pieces, she already saves them. The new ask would be also add those to OneDrive in a different file format, because you said you do it by month and date, obviously, because that's the meeting. And I think we would look for it by locale, address, or business name, or
Sure.
project name, or something like that. But OpenGov runs on address, so I would lean towards address, so that there's at least some similarity to help people out there. And then it's just put those documents in. Keeping in mind that if a document comes in late to Brenda, she sends out an updated packet to us. So she's already had to recreate the PDF packet. And now we're asking her to also update that file. Okay. So I would love it if we'd be willing to try it out for a period of time and see how it goes and listen to feedback if Brenda and Francis are willing to support that. Pretty please.
No, thank you, folks. I think even for this evening, if it wasn't that we had the previous tobacco violation for that first discussion point on the report, I actually went in trying to on the town website trying to find it, and if you don't have the date of it, it's very hard to try to find that violation to know, okay, it's been the last 36 months. Was that 35 months ago, or was it 4 months ago? That I actually had difficulty, and I am not Dr. Wason and Kevin Davis, but I like to think I'm relatively tech savvy, and I was having difficulty as a member of the board finding the previous violation. And for me, that's a challenge, that if the board can't identify previous issues at an address, an organization, or something, then how can we make informed decisions moving forward? And certainly if this board turns over in the next 3 years, unless you have the historical memory of professional staff or board members, that it can be hard to look at problematic addresses, owners, residences, properties, licensees, if you can't see past your own term or what you can remember in past minutes that you've received. That's really challenging. So I think trying to do searches through minutes to then try to find the packet, to then try to find an answer to a question, particularly if that's 15 previous events at an address, that is a lot of work. Not that we are not willing to do due diligence, but that's a lot probably more complex than it should have to be. But that's, again, that's just maybe my approach to it, which is kind of why I wanted to kind of talk about that as a way of putting that in there as an administrative piece of, can we figure out whether it's a request to our professional staff to be able to pull it all. But I can't imagine Brenda would want to try to dig through 30 or 40 sets of minutes and packets to assemble every time in the last 10 years there's been an issue at pick an address. That's not going to be practical either. So all right, so let's see what we can work on that, and if we can come up with a way of just kind of collating some of the information so that it's more searchable and for both the professional staff as well as the board. I have 2 sets of minutes, and then we'll open it up to any other board discussion, and I don't see anything else. So I'm going to share my screen. We'll start with the meeting minutes from March 13th, 2024. I apologize, one moment. All right, we should be seeing the March 13th, 2024 minutes. Present were myself, Kevin Baker, and Gina Fratellone. Has anyone have a chance to review, and does anybody have any comments, questions, concerns, or edits to the March 13th, 2024 minutes?
I missed a good meeting.
All right. right, I am seeing no hands, no nods. Does anyone have a motion for the March 13, 2024 minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes for March 13, 2024, as presented.
Second,
I have a motion and second. Roll call vote. Kevin Baker,
Kevin Baker votes yes.
Kevin Davis,
Abstain.
Gino Fratelloni,
yes, sir.
Matt Wason,
Matt Wason abstain.
and the chair votes yes. The minutes for March 13, 2024 are approved as presented. I apologize for making everybody nauseous with my fast scroll.
All right, we
And I'm
can't-
moving to the meeting minutes of, did I stop sharing? I stopped sharing. I apologize. Let me stop
It's
sharing.
okay.
Stop sharing. Try that again. All right. I don't know how I clicked off stop sharing, but here we are anyway. February 28th, 2024 meeting minutes. All board members were present except for Mr. Fratelloni. Any
was
comments,
there.
edits, corrections?
I was there. Oh, I was not. You're right. Okay.
Any comments, edits, suggestions, issues from any of our board?
Make a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
I have a motion
Second.
and a second. Roll call vote. Kevin Baker,
Kevin Baker votes yes.
Kevin Davis,
Kevin Davis votes yes.
Gino Fratelloni,
Yes. Even though I was absent.
so abstain. Matt Wason,
Matt Wason, yes.
and the chair votes yes. The meeting minutes presented for February 28, 2024 are approved. Correspondence. I think we have any new correspondence unless I'm missing something. I don't have everything scribbled on my notes. Stop sharing on purpose this time. Any board member updates or notes for us?
I think our April meetings are April 10th and the 24th. Is that correct?
Moment. April 10 and 24, correct.
Okay. Just as a point of information for everybody, I will be on a business trip on the week of the 22nd, so the night of the 24th. I will be out of the state. And if I can figure out a way to call in from Alaska, from where I'll be, great. If not, then I won't be present. So I'm just giving you guys heads up with that.
They do have the internet there in Alaska.
They do, but where I will be temporarily on that day, there's not going to be a lot of anything around where we are.
Okay, just for Mr. Baker and myself, I believe for this round, that is the 24th of April is also tentatively the Rotary Club's candidate night. So I'm not sure if Mr. Baker's plans for that night or not. If certainly if both of us were to attend, that would leave Mr. Wason, Mr. Fratelloni, and Mr. Davis needing to be there to make a quorum and have a meeting that evening. So with Mr. Davis being a potential question mark or technologically potentially challenged for that evening, we may want to explore either rescheduling of that meeting or simply skipping that meeting. Our following meeting after April 24 is May 8th. So it is 2 weeks. It is 2 full weeks after that one. I don't think we necessarily need to make a decision this evening, but we don't have a lot of time to think about it. So I think if you want to touch base with me directly, that way it'll not be a serial communication, but just give me your thoughts about your availability for that evening, and we can bring it back for our next regularly scheduled meeting on the 10th for a discussion of whether we think we need to postpone. We may also have a bit of a sense of what that meeting might look like. Whether skipping that meeting would have an impact on public hearings, for example, and operations. So we'll ask Jim and Francis and Brenda to kind of keep in the back of their heads of what looked like it's coming up that may land on that night if it looks critical or postponable or potentially can be moved up to the 10th kind of thing. If you guys can just keep that on your radar, just so we can still do our jobs, but also do the rest of our jobs. All right. Any other items for board member updates? Mr. Baker, so Dr. Mason, go ahead.
Oh, just Kevin and Francis and I have met this week and last week. I'm just trying to make sure, Kevin Baker. I'm just trying to make sure that this board has constant contact with Francis. I volunteered myself because I have a pretty flexible schedule. So we've been meeting. I think if we kind of nail down our time, or we can try to send it out, see if anybody else wants to join. Obviously, not more than 2 of us at a time. But we're not, Kevin Baker and I are not like making decisions or finalizing anything. It's more of just making sure, like you said at the beginning of the meeting, Dan, Francis has connections. So if there's anything that's coming up that needs more ready assessment, then we're there to provide a connection so that we can bring something back to the board if necessary. So if there is something that comes up, it will come to the rest of you all through one of us. And then as well as we are helping to make sure he doesn't get bored by bringing up things that need to be done or are outstanding, not necessarily long-term goal stuff, but like Kevin mentioned earlier, trash hauler regs that haven't quite been nailed down. So we'll kind of keep feeding those kind of things as we go through our historical information, say, oh, and by the way, add this to your growing list of projects to work on at some point. So hope that's okay with everybody, because I kind of mentioned it to a couple people beforehand, but that's about it. And we'll just plan on keep doing that so that Francis has the support and we have the connection. So hopefully if stuff comes up in this meeting, we'll make sure we also have some follow-up time. So that's what we're doing.
No, that's great. And I'm sure Francis is not shy about bringing things forward to us, but for anybody who's meeting in those meetings as well, just bring stuff forward going, hey, we had a discussion today about this thing that is not on our radar at all, but seems like something that really is important. We should be thinking about bringing those forward as well. That, this is not a one-way street where we come up with the plans and he gets to operationalize them. That this is, he's our professional person for a reason, that we are, he has to operate under our authority, but we are utilizing his expertise to make sure that we can do our jobs and we can work together as a team. So, this is definitely two ways. And when Francis sees, something out there going, hey, in previous places I've seen this work really, really well. Is there a way we can do that here? Bring them forward. Doesn't mean we will, but we don't always know what we don't know. So bring stuff forward. However that is, we don't care. I love hearing ideas. All right. Any other board member input? Gino, Kevin, Francis,
Great
Jim,
meeting
Brenda.
tonight.
Oh.
Thank you guys for everything. I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
A second.
All right.
Here we go. All right. Roll call vote. Kevin Baker,
Kevin Baker votes yes.
Kevin Davis,
Yes.
Gino Fredoloni,
Yes.
Matt Wason.
Matt Wason, yes.
Chair votes yes. The March 27, 2024 the Littleton Board of Health meeting stands adjourned. Thank you all for all your work tonight.